The truth is, KRS-One is almost 60 years old, and for decades people have whispered about what really started hip-hop's most legendary feud. But the real story behind the Bridge Wars isn't what most people think it is. Lawrence Parker, better known as KRS-One, became one of hip-hop's most respected figures through a battle that changed everything. Today he's known as the Teacher, a conscious rapper who founded movements for peace. But back in the mid-1980s, he was Blastmaster KRS, and he was ready for war. To understand this story, we need to go back to when hip-hop was changing. The mid-1980s marked a huge shift in the culture. The old-school era was ending, and something harder was taking its place. The Bronx had always been hip-hop's birthplace, where pioneers like Kool Herc and Grandmaster Flash created the foundation. But by 1984, Queens was rising up as a serious challenger. This wasn't just about music. The shift from old school to new school reflected the harsh realities gripping New York City's inner communities. The party-oriented themes were giving way to aggressive sounds that mirrored deteriorating urban conditions. Abandoned factories, boarded buildings, and drug epidemics were changing the landscape, and the music was changing with it. Queensbridge, a housing project in Long Island City, was becoming a hotbed of talent. DJ and producer Marley Marl was building something special there with his Juice Crew. Queens was making moves, and the competition between boroughs was getting intense. This growing regional pride set the stage for one of hip-hop's most significant feuds. But before any diss tracks were recorded, the real battleground was New York's radio stations. WBLS and WRKS were locked in their own fierce radio war. WBLS had Rap Attack, hosted by Mr. Magic with Marley Marl on the turntables. This show held immense power. If Mr. Magic rejected a record, it was a professional slight that artists couldn't easily shake off. Then came the song that started everything. In late 1985, MC Shan released The Bridge, produced by Marley Marl. The track was meant to be a simple anthem celebrating Queensbridge and its growing rap scene. Shan was just trying to represent his neighborhood, making it one of the first Rep Your Hood records. But here's where things got twisted. People started saying the song claimed that Queens was where hip-hop began. MC Shan has always said this wasn't true. He stated that everyone knows hip-hop started in the West Bronx. The song never actually said Queens was hip-hop's birthplace, but that's how some people heard it. KRS-One was one of those people. He took it as a direct challenge to the Bronx history, but the real story goes much deeper than geography. Here's what really happened. Before KRS-One became famous, he and his partner, Scott LaRock, were struggling artists. They had recorded a demo single under the name 1241 called Success is the Word. They took this demo to Mr. Magic, a powerful radio personality at WBLS, hoping to get it played on his show, Rap Attack. Mr. Magic listened to their demo and dismissed it as whack. This rejection was crushing for the young artists. Getting rejected by someone that powerful in the hip-hop world was not something you could easily shake off. The rival station WRKS featured cool DJ Red Alert, who was an ally of Bronx-based artists like Boogie Down Productions. When they later heard The Bridge, KRS-One and Scott LaRock saw an opportunity. They decided to respond not just to MC Shan, but to the entire Juice Crew and Mr. Magic himself. They used the whole Queens versus Bronx angle as their public excuse, but the real motivation was personal revenge. This was genius strategy. Instead of just complaining about a radio rejection, KRS-One transformed his personal grudge into a heroic defense of the Bronx's honor. He positioned himself as the defender of hip-hop's true birthplace, which was a much more powerful story than just being mad about getting turned down. KRS-One understood that fighting for the reputation of the South Bronx was more career-defining than a simple grievance against a radio DJ. This strategic transformation of a private slight into a public declaration of war launched his legendary status. In 1986, Boogie Down Productions fired back with South Bronx. The track was aggressive and direct. KRS-One's lyrics were brutal, calling out MC Shan with lines like, "You got dropped off MCA because the rhymes you wrote was whack," and threatening, "If you pop that junk up in the Bronx, you might not live." The production was innovative too. They sampled James Brown's "Get Up Off of That Thing" and used the horn section in 11 different pitches throughout the song. 7 of these pitches were combined to create what they called a threatening effect. This wasn't just lyrical warfare, it was sonic innovation. The hook was a fiercely shouted chant of "South Bronx, the South South Bronx," setting a confrontational tone from the start. This track served as both an ode to the South Bronx and a brutal rebuke of MC Shan's crew. MC Shan tried to fight back with "Kill That Noise" in 1987. He took shots at KRS-One and denied ever claiming Queens was hip-hop's birthplace. He mocked KRS-One for taking offense and suggested that Boogie Down Productions was just trying to jump on their bandwagon. But after this response, Shan mostly stepped back from the battle. Other Queensbridge residents like Rockwell Knoll and Poet kept the fight going, with tracks that even attacked KRS-One's wife and allies. Then came the knockout punch. In 1987, Boogie Down Productions released The Bridge Is Over, and it was devastating. The song is still considered one of hip-hop's greatest diss tracks. It opened by sampling the bridge itself, making it clear this was a direct attack. KRS-One's lyrics were surgical. He called out MC Sean, Marley Marl, Mr. Magic, and Roxanne Shante by name. The chorus cleverly used the melody from Billy Joel's It's Still Rock and Roll to Me, turning a pop anthem into a brutal diss track hook. Lines like, "What's the matter with your MC, Marley Marl? Don't know, you know that he's out of touch?" cut deep. The song also featured a reggae flavor and Jamaican-style delivery, showing KRS-One's diverse influences. The production was so foundational that its drum break was later sampled by artists like the Beastie Boys and TLC. The instrumental was even used in the film Get Rich or Die Tryin'. KRS-One had won the war. The Bridge Wars established him as hip-hop royalty and launched his legendary career. But victory came with a terrible cost. Shortly after their debut album Criminal Minded was released, Scott LaRock was shot and killed. This tragedy changed everything for KRS-One. The violence he had been rapping about became real when it took his partner's life. In response to this loss, KRS-One founded the Stop the Violence movement in 1988. His focus shifted completely from lyrical combat to social activism. The Blastmaster persona gave way to the Teacher, reflecting his new role as a conscious educator rather than a battle-ready warrior. This transformation showed how one of hip-hop's most violent rivalries could ultimately lead to a movement dedicated to preventing bloodshed. KRS-One turned his pain into purpose, using his platform to fight against the very violence that had claimed his friend. The Bridge Wars was different from later hip-hop feuds. Unlike the tragic Tupac versus Biggie rivalry that ended in murder, or the personal attacks in battles like Nas versus Jay-Z, the Bridge Wars stayed focused on skill and wordplay. The Tupac and Biggie feud was driven by label politics and personal betrayal, escalating to genuine physical violence that was heavily inflated by the media. The Bridge Wars was a conflict of honor and wit that thankfully never escalated into physical violence. It represented a period when hip-hop was still a loosely connected collection of local folk musics, where battles were showcases of talent rather than means to commercial gain or physical harm. This feud set the blueprint for how lyrical battles should be fought. It showed that wars could be won through the power of words alone, not through violence or destruction. The artists involved were pioneering the weaponization of sound itself, using innovative production techniques to amplify their lyrical messages. The track-by-track progression demonstrated key evolution in hip-hop as an art form. The famous Billy Joel interpolation in The Bridge Is Over was a stroke of genius, establishing a blueprint for future rivalries. This moment moved the art of the diss track beyond simple rhyming into a full-scale creative endeavor. 20 years later, the story came full circle. In 2007, KRS-One and Marley Marl released a collaborative album called Hip Hop Lives. This reconciliation was motivated by more than just artistic collaboration. KRS-One wanted to bury the hatchet before either of them passed away. He recalled that Marley Marl had a heart attack shortly after the album's release, and Mr. Magic died a year later. The album served as a response to claims that hip-hop was dead, with the title itself being a collective rebuttal to Nas's 2006 album, Hip Hop Is Dead. Though the critical reception was mixed, with reviewers noting that KRS-One's lyrical content had become bland, it stood as a powerful symbol of resolution and respect. Today, the Bridge Wars remains a mythological tale in hip-hop history. It continues to be referenced by generations of artists and has been fondly remembered as a classic rivalry. Even MC Sean has challenged the narrative in recent interviews, asserting that he and KRS-One never truly battled in the traditional sense, since real battles require artists performing on stage together. The feud created a definitive blueprint for how to effectively dismantle opponents through pure lyrical skill. It established the template for what classic hip-hop beef should be, a test of lyrical dexterity, wit, and narrative control, fought primarily through music. KRS-One's journey from rejected artist to Bronx defender to respected teacher shows the transformative power of hip-hop. What started as personal revenge became a career-defining moment that ultimately led to a movement for peace and education. The bridge may be over, but its story continues to inspire new generations of artists who understand that the greatest battles are won not with violence, but with the power of words and the strength of character.